Welcome to Fixated, the Fixed Income Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Moran, Editorial Director of Fixed Income News Australia. Join me as I talk about the latest news, views and education in fixed income investment. I'll be joined by industry experts from Australia and across the globe. Welcome. Today I have with me Jenna Hayes, who is Executive Director, Head of Sales and Income Asset Management. I first met Jenna about 8 years ago when we both worked for FIG Securities. While Jenna was in a different role, she outshone her male colleagues. Her enthusiasm to learn and explore different ways to excel at her job really stood out. She's an inspiration. So I'm really excited that she has agreed to join us for this interview for International Women's Day. Welcome, Jenna. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me, Liz.
Absolutely, our pleasure. Jenna, can we start? Can you tell us a little bit about your current role?
Yeah, of course. So I'm head of sales at Income Asset Management. We are a debt-focused investment house where we're providing investors access to direct bonds, syndicated term loans, and managed accounts. In my role, I'm servicing wholesale investors as well as financial advisors, providing access to the core asset class that is finally in vogue called fixed income.
Oh, I know it's been a long time coming, but it sure is. And with all this geopolitical tension, investors are heading for risk-off assets, and fixed income definitely is where it's at. So it's great that you're here talking to us today. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your favourite aspects of your role and your least favourite aspects of the role?
Yes, favorite is easy. It would be my clients. In the past, I was working at large global banks and predominantly covering hedge funds. It was very exciting, but they weren't always transparent about what they were doing, why they were doing it, what views they had. Now I find it much more satisfying because the bond portfolios that I'm constructing, they're helping end clients. It would be people like my mum and dad saving for retirement, not for profit seeking reliable income, could be people that have just sold their business or financial advisors that are growing theirs. There are some of my clients that I'll speak to every day. Some, strangely enough, don't want to speak to their bond broker every day. It's weird, but it's those relationships that make the job special. I've got a client at the moment who's looking for property in Bondi, and I probably send him just as many realestate.com links as I do bonds.
Fantastic. I'm not sure the boss is going to want to hear that, Jenna, but
um,
um,
least favorite?
mhm.
That's probably that the markets never stop. They don't stop when you've just gotten married and you're trying to take a honeymoon. They don't stop when you've got a big day of meetings lined up and then an issuer comes to market. I was in Brisbane one year over the ECA public holiday, and I remember B&P came to market, and I thought, geez, it's almost like the Brisbane show day doesn't appear on the French calendar. And then you
Yes.
might remember last year, it was only the second week of January, and ANZ came to the market with a tier two. And our feedback to them at the end of last year was, please don't come to the market so early. Let our clients enjoy their summer break. And then this year, of course, it gets to February without any tier two issuance. And we were saying, okay, it's time. We're ready for you now. And then, of course, they all came at once.
No, they sure did. They sure did. So I just want to go back a little bit in time and talk about, when you're in high school and maybe some of the subjects you studied and what you loved and, how did you decide on a career path?
Yeah, sure. When I was growing up, if you were smart and you were good at school, it was pretty much assumed that you would become a doctor or a lawyer. I hope that that's no longer what young people are told, because when I look around now, the most successful people are careers that I didn't even know existed when I was in high school. In my case, I come from a medical family. Both my parents are GPs and run their own practice. It's actually incredibly sweet. They work together every day. They drive to and from work together. They've been married for 44 years. They're in their 70s now, so I'd say it could be time to retire. But yes, they definitely hoped I would follow in their footsteps. In year 12, I did study for the UMAT and did well at it. I even ended up tutoring it. So medicine was the plan. But on the night that university preferences were due, at the very last minute, I switched my preference from medicine to law. My parents still joke that it was a real loss to the medical profession.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Wow, that right down to the, 12th hour. Tough decision. And I think, a lot of really intelligent women and men if they're really bright at school, they are encouraged still to do law or medicine. And I don't know, there's more out there.
Completely agree. There are so many different paths to success, and a lot of them are ones that we don't even really know exist.
No, but you didn't follow law, did you? So,
No, you're right. So I did love debating and public speaking. So when
mhm.
I got into university, I think I did assume that I would go on to be a lawyer, a barrister, maybe shouting, "I object." I was from the Legally Blonde generation that pretty much inspired a generation of women to pursue legal careers. So I studied law and commerce, and I did a major in accounting because I had a powerhouse female cousin who I look up to a lot. And I remember she once told me that the ability to read a balance sheet would always come in handy. And then I guess as for how I ended up in finance, when I was at university, I found that the commerce subjects came very easily to me, whereas
Mm.
the legal subjects, they required a lot more grind to get the same results. So I'm not necessarily advocating for choosing the easy path, but you typically will find more joy in subjects that play to your strengths and that you have a natural affinity with. After that, I did internships at Macquarie Bank in their corporate and asset finance team. And I ended up working for them casually in my final year if they were busy on a transaction. It was interesting work. I loved my team. The highs were high. But also, I did find it tough to work so hard on a transaction that a lot of the time wouldn't happen. I then did an exchange program at UCLA, go Bruins, and I interned in Qantas in Los Angeles. And then finally, I accepted a graduate role at Deutsche Bank in no small part because I knew that they sent their grads to London for training. That's where, yeah.
Sounds like you had the pick of what you wanted to do. I'm interested to hear about doing an internship in LA though with Qantas. Was that good or not so good, or did they offer you a job? What was it like being in LA for, I'm assuming, 6 weeks, 3 months?
Yeah, it was great. And it was also interesting for me to kind of see the different styles of doing business in Australia versus doing business in LA. Not that I'd, had a lot of work experience in Australia at that point. It was fantastic, although my internship was in marketing, and I did feel, that my passion was more in finance.
Oh no, fair enough. And then you said you went to Deutsche Bank and they sent you to London. That's amazing. What was that like?
It was incredible. The London experience was amazing. Just being with so many different people, all living together, learning together, and then starting on the trading room floor in Sydney. It was incredible. So loud, so fast paced. When a key piece of data would come out, 11:30 for local data, or the RBA decisions at 2:30, the atmosphere, it would be electric. There are just so many aspects of a trading room floor you just can't really replicate. On the desk, there would be moments when something would happen, and everyone on the trading room floor, over 100 people, would burst into applause, even if it originated all the way over in equities and you had no idea really of the catalyst. The applause would make its way down to our end like a Mexican wave. In the morning, if you were late, you needed to shout breakfast for the desk. Now, that could cost a couple $100.
Mm.
I lived in Woolloomooloo at the time, so I was only a 15-minute walk from the office. I really had no excuse to be late, but I remember one morning sprinting through the domain just to avoid having to shout $200 worth of Maccas. Um, but there are really tough aspects too. Banks have a lot of movement, redundancies are part and parcel, resignations happen frequently, particularly after bonuses. And at banks, people get walked immediately. So you become quite used to seeing an empty chair where someone was sitting the day before. You do toughen up over time. The trading floor is also where I met my husband, so I have a lot to be thankful to
Mhm.
Deutsche Bank for.
Oh, wow. So they were some of the tough times, obviously, seeing colleagues go or move on. What was it like? I don't imagine there were many women on the floor. What was it like for you as a young graduate going in there? Were there many other women? Did you have a friendship group or a support group or a mentor?
Yeah, when you start, you are assigned, a buddy and a mentor. And I think for a lot of people, the mentor was someone maybe they had coffee with once and then didn't really follow up with again. But I got quite lucky. I really connected with my mentor early on, and my relationship with her is actually how I got a job later down the track. And so it's really amazing those connections you form, the genuine relationships and friendships. And our grad class was very close as well. It can be tough, I think, as a junior to feel like you're going to have impact in such a large place. But I like to think that I did. At Deutsche Bank, I was on the FX desk. FX works on a handover system. And so Sydney takes over from New York, then London takes over from Sydney at the end of our day. When I started on the FX desk, there was a newsletter coming out of the US called the New York Slice and out of London called the London Calling. There was nothing coming out of Australia at the time. So the other centres were really just flying blind for what happened during the 12 hours that we were at the desk. I started an Aussie rap that I called the G'daily, so that way, when my overseas counterparts and clients came in the morning, they would know what happened during our session. FX, though, it's just a different beast. The markets move so quickly. There would be days you couldn't even go to the bathroom because you just couldn't leave the screen. I remember telling friends about it, and it's tough to describe. They think they understand it now because they watch Industry on HBO, and Yasmin started on the FX desk. It was sort of like that. But some of the most exciting days of my career were Brexit, the first Trump election, my boss screaming across the desk, check your big figures.
It sounds so exciting, but I think really tough. I mean, you would just go home mentally exhausted, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah, you definitely do. And you, as you mentioned, you definitely do still notice that it's male dominated. You get used to being the only woman in a lot of rooms or at a lot of tables. I was attending an industry lunch at Yumcha, and a friend saw a photo and laughed and said, "Oh, tell me you work in finance without telling me you work in finance." When I looked at the photo, I only then realized, oh, I was the only woman in a table of men. But I suppose I've stopped noticing because so often it is the case. That being said, it's really not for lack of trying. I look at my firm now, and for every role that we advertise, we're getting about 10 male applicants for every one female. Often, when we're hiring, I will seek out candidates on LinkedIn who haven't applied for the role, but that's assuming that those candidates are on LinkedIn. I think it's really important that we attack earlier on. I mean, maybe attack is the wrong word, but we just need to encourage women at high school, at university. So often when I'm interviewing graduates, I'm hearing men talk about their share portfolios from when they were young, how they read the AFR every day. Look, that's amazing, but it wasn't me. I'm very passionate about markets now, but I certainly wasn't in high school. And I do want to encourage women that just because you didn't invest yourself from a young age, that doesn't mean that it's not for you.
Look, I think workplaces are more aware or cognizant of the fact that they want some diversity in the workplace too. You know, they want people of different gender, different ethnicity, that have other languages and things to bring in some balance into workplaces. And ultimately, if you can get a team working well, a diverse team working well, it really has fantastic output. So it's good to hear that you're seeking out women and looking at LinkedIn profiles. And so I would encourage anyone listening to make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date and that you are active on it, that you are supporting, making comment if you can. It's really important.
Completely. And cultural fit is important as well, not just experience or what you studied, because you spend so much time with these people. 80% of your life is spent at your desk. And so it's really important that you enjoy who you're working with.
Absolutely. And likewise, if you're not enjoying it or you don't think the company's looking after you, look around and be positive and confident, and don't not apply for a job if you can't tick every box, because actually most people can't tick every box when they apply for a job. And certainly companies, some will place more importance on some things over others. So as long as you are willing to learn and enthusiastic, I think you should go for it.
And to that point, I mean, I feel like there is data that shows men will apply for roles even though they don't tick every box, whereas women, we wait till we can tick every box to apply. So, just encouraging women to believe in themselves, and it doesn't actually matter if you're not ticking every single criteria they're listing.
And also, you need to apply for jobs and get interview experience to gain confidence. You don't want the one job you apply for to be the one that you really want. You want to have had a few, interviews and, be gaining confidence in answering questions. And so I think, apply for lots if you're looking to move.
Completely. I remember getting interview advice from someone when I was starting out, and the advice that I got was terrible. It was, at the end of an interview, when the interviewer says, "Do you have any questions?" The person told me to wink and say, "So when do I start?"
Oh my gosh.
Terrible advice. So, I don't think I ever actually applied it, but yeah.
I actually really used to love it when people came to the interview and they had a list of questions on a piece of paper because they'd thought about it, they'd written them down. It was all very considered, and I really liked that. But yeah, no, I don't think winking was, that would be like no. Was that a bloke that gave you that advice, Jen?
It 100% was.
Might have different connotation if you were doing it. Um, so tell me, I loved hearing the story of you starting up the daily chat for Australia on the FX trading desk. What other impact did you feel you could bring to a company as big as Deutsche Bank as a grad?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the networks that you start are really important. I got quite
Mm.
involved in the women's network, and it's
Mhm.
important because when you start, you don't have a lot of control over what team you end up in. I mean, I remember they gave me some spiel about, "Oh, we've considered your legal degree and your background, and we've, really carefully chosen you to start in FX." And then the day that I started, they said, "Oh, such and such quit last week, you're their replacement." So you really do want exposure across as many different areas of the bank as possible, because chances are you might not stay with that bank forever. And so you really want to get exposure to other sectors so that you know where else you might want experience. After I was in FX, I ended up getting experience in equities at UBS and then in fixed income at Fixed Securities, which is where I met you. And I think that that was great to my development to be able to get good understanding across the markets floor. And that certainly helped me where I am now.
No, I think that's amazing. To have worked in those different markets is huge and gives you such a broad understanding of things. Tell me, you've obviously worked in a few very well big companies and some medium-sized companies. What have you noticed over time? Are they still is finance still dominated by men? Are there more women in the workplace? Are there more senior women in the workplace? Do you think it's changed at all or not particularly?
I think that there are more women in the workplace now, and that's so encouraging to see. And I hope that that does kind of continue to grow. Workplaces are definitely trying to, introduce policies to get women back after they've had kids. But at the same time, as I mentioned, given that the applications that you get, the numbers are still so skewed to men, I do think it's hard for organizations that want to hire more women, but at the same time, they feel like they're limited by the CVs that they're getting, and it's tough.
Yeah, it sure is tough. This is a funny question, but I really wanted to ask you, have you ever asked for a promotion or a pay rise?
Of course. Um,
Great.
my advice when asking for promotions or a pay rise would be go in with facts. One year, someone in my team, a man, pulled me into a room and said they'd moved into a more expensive rental in the eastern suburbs and needed a pay rise. I wanted to laugh. That is not how pay rises work, because you've chosen to alter your personal circumstances. Work should pay. No. When it comes to year end, talk about what you delivered for the firm, talk about your contribution. That said, I mean, I do wish it worked the other way. After the IBA hiked rates last month and with one or two more on the way, it would be incredibly nice to go to my bosses and say, my mortgage has gone up and so my salary should too. But no, that is not how it works.
No. I used to keep a spreadsheet of what I'd done and how I met my KPIs and why I'd overachieved. And I always found that was like really handy on that, the day of your annual review to go in and here's what I've done and to help sway whoever I was reporting to at the time to think about giving me a pay rise at a minimum, always ask for a promotion. Because, if you don't ask, you don't get, which is something I learned from a male colleague years and years ago. You have to ask or they're not going to pay you. So, just you start doing it and you get more comfortable with it very quickly.
Liz, I'm the same. I keep an inbox folder called wins and just, when
Mm.
you have a win during the year, just file it there because, you can have something great happen that year, but still when it comes to the end of the year, you're kind of scratching your head saying, wait, what were my big accomplishments for this year? So it really does make it easy.
Oh, I'd love to see that mailbox that says wins. Oh, I bet you've got lots, Jenna. Um, at this stage of your career, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would say, firstly, don't be stuck on titles. I think that
Mm.
starting out, I really wanted prestige, to work at a global firm that everyone has heard of, like Goldman Sachs, to work overseas, to cover big clients. Now I've been fortunate enough to work at some big banks, Deutsche Bank and UBS. I've worked overseas for short stints, New York, London, covered some big clients, flown to Singapore just to meet them. I'm very thankful for these experiences. But for me personally, I've experienced the most growth and learnt the most where I am now at Income Asset Management. We're not a household name yet, but I'm so proud of what we've built and how we're helping clients. Secondly, I'd say don't be stuck on your own title. I remember when I moved firms, I saw on LinkedIn that such and such got a promotion, and it was someone who I'd started out with, and now they had progressed to the next level. I was happy for them, but it was hard not to feel like I was getting eclipsed or left behind. Now, looking back, I'm able to really draw on what Sheryl Sandberg wrote. Your career isn't a ladder, it's a jungle gym. Instead of just moving up, you might move sideways to build new skills. You might move downwards to change fields, diagonally to gain new perspectives. I look back, and it was all of those moves that have actually helped me to create a more robust career path.
Do you know, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's the sum of everything you've done, no matter if it was a part-time job. I worked at Sports Girl for a while, no matter what it was, it creates the whole of you and it's all useful. So I think that's a really important point. And nice to hear you have similar perspective to me as well. What importance do you place on networking?
Oh, it's very important. I spoke to it before about the story about my mentor. Besides my graduate role at Deutsche Bank, since then, none of the roles that I've had were jobs that I actually saw advertised and then formally applied for. Every opportunity has come through relationships, through conversations, word of mouth, and people thinking of me when something came up. The time in my life I actually needed to network the most was COVID. I was on gardening leave between leaving UBS and starting IAM, and I was traveling in the Northern Territory. Now, that was June 2021, and while we were there, Sydney went into lockdown. I remember calling John Lechty, our CEO, saying, I cannot start a sales role from a lockdown. How do you feel if I fly to Brisbane and work from there? So there I was with my empty suitcase filled with hiking gear, trying to build my client base from scratch. I was out meeting accountants, advisors. Someone joked that I went to the opening of an envelope. People can think that networking is a dirty word. I just don't see it like that. It's not really about collecting business cards. It's building those relationships over time, staying in touch, being helpful. I'm so passionate about fixed income and its role in client portfolios that talking about it comes very naturally. Going on a podcast like this to talk about myself is actually harder, but talking about fixed income, that's easy. When I got married recently, in my mum's speech, she joked that I'd been spotted at the bar on the night selling bonds to my wedding guests.
Uh, your enthusiasm is just infectious, and I just loved working with you at FIG. And I remember one story about you were telling me about must have been living in an apartment, but you met someone in the lift, and you got speaking to the guy, and then you ended up having a coffee talking bonds to someone you'd met in the lift. So, that's so embracing all of your life and networking, and you're such an open, generous person too. People want to have a chat to you, Jenna. So it's so great. Sort of coming towards the end of the interview, and I ask most women this because most women stumble over it. But what do you do for yourself?
I get up at 5:30 most mornings to go
Mm.
for a walk along Bondi with my husband.
Mm.
We only moved to the area about 6 months ago, and you might remember he'd been living in Singapore before that, and we were doing long distance. So it still feels very special. I try not to check emails first thing when I wake up. I'll check markets, but I do try to leave my phone at home so that when we're walking along the prom, I'm not already distracted thinking about the day ahead, what meetings I have, and mentally forming my to-do list. Bondi at 6 a.m. feels like midday at a Saturday anywhere else. On Friday mornings, it's not uncommon to hear DJs. There'll be brand activations handing out protein yogurts. It's very special.
It's crazy. It's
Mhm.
crazy. But beautiful beach and beautiful part of the world and very close to Sydney. So easy to get into the office, I imagine. Just finally, I think it's still pretty hard for women in finance. And I didn't go into this now, but I'd like to go back a bit. Just how did you meet your mentor? Did you meet them or were you assigned them? How did that
Yeah,
work?
Yeah, when I was a Deutscher, I was assigned one, and we just kind of got lucky and hit it off. And so, I've kept up that relationship over time. But also, I think that throughout your career, now I have one through work. But also, you kind of develop informal ones along the way that I don't even know if they'd really think of themselves as my mentor. They probably don't know how much I'm clinging on to every kind of offhand comment they make. But I think that's also, important to remember. Like going back to what my cousin told me about a balance sheet, and I really clung to that, and it helped shape me having a major in accounting. I think, the younger generation definitely is looking to us for guidance. So share wisdom and give them tips along the way.
That actually runs into my last question really nicely. Can you give us a few tips regarding your success?
Yeah, sure. I think when you think of a typical bond buyer, you do often think of someone older, usually with more grey hair than I have. Early in my career, I was self conscious about my age. I was worried that clients might prefer someone older, more seasoned. I actually had one client who I'd looked after for years over the phone, but had never met in person. And when they were finally in Sydney, I was so nervous to meet. I was worried that I would be younger than they thought, or not what they were expecting or hoping. Of course, these fears were unfounded. One of my clients now, he loves to play backgammon, and so do I. So when we meet, we'll talk business first and then play backgammon after. He has not won yet. So I'd say to find common ground, it's always there. I think clients even like it now because they know that, knock on wood, I'll outlast them and they won't get passed around to someone else. I would say, though, be yourself. I'm naturally quite bubbly and enthusiastic. Over the years, I've tried at times to dial that down, to be more serious or more reserved, thinking that way I would be taken more seriously. It doesn't work. I think that ultimately people do want to work with people who they like and trust, and you're going to come off a lot more trustworthy if you're being yourself, especially in a world that's being increasingly shaped by AI, relationships, human connection. They're only going to matter more. So that's a strength. Use it. And longer term, I would just love to see more women in finance. I would love one day to sit at a yum cha table full of women and have it not be for International Women's Day, just a normal Monday.
Oh, so good to talk to you, Jenna, and, I feel like I've got a best of energy for the rest of my day now as well. So,
Thank you.
Jenna Hayes from Income Asset Management, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute delight, and, happy International Women's Day.
Thanks, Liz. Happy International Women's Day to you too.
Thank you for joining us this week on Fixated, the Fixed Income Podcast. Still hungry for more fixed income news, views and education? Then visit fixedincomnews.com.au and don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to have the latest news delivered right to your inbox. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Elizabeth Moran and we'll see you next episode on Fixated, the Fixed Income Podcast.